Welcome to the Unity of Olympia podcast.
Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So some of you may have heard of a motivational speaker from, I believe, the 1970s named Zig Ziglar. Anyone remember him? Yeah. Okay. And he had a very famous quote that said, motivation doesn't last. Neither does bathing. That's why we recommend doing it every day. And we might say the same thing about our spiritual practices. So one of the things I believe about myself, and I believe about everyone in this room and everyone on the planet, is that we are all spiritual beings having a human experience. And I don't know about you, but there's times that I feel very plugged into my spiritual experience, my spiritual growth. And then there's times where it sort of feels like it wears off. Perhaps I'm having a particularly human day. Perhaps I'm on a climb. Perhaps I'm facing adversity. And for me, having a regular spiritual practice, a regular time of touching base with spiritual principles that resonate with me, a regular time of doing spiritual practices that fill me back up, is like having that regular shower. It just helps me feel like I'm living the level of spirituality that I want to live. And so today's talk is the spiritual keys to overcoming adversity. I think the ushers had this little booklet when people came in the door. If you didn't get one, hopefully, Nancy has some more. Thank you, Nancy. So maybe if you didn't get one and you want one, please raise your hand and she'll hand one out to you. And this is a book of collected wisdom from various Unity writers who have a lot to say about their practices when they're dealing with life's struggles. I think maybe the musicians, Nancy, the musicians over here maybe wanted a copy. Yeah, thank you very much. All right, so a collection of wisdom, so fun stuff to dig into. And I know we have a lot of wisdom also right here in this room, because I know people in this room have practiced and are continuing to practice spiritual principles. I was introduced by Rodney very briefly at the beginning of today. For those of you who haven't met me yet, my name is Audrey Pitchford. I am your licensed Unity teacher. And something that I've shared before is every time I'm doing a talk, I sort of think about it as like teaching a class. So I always think about questions. I always ask you stuff because I want to know what you think. I know what I think. I can tell you what Unity teaches. I would never presume to tell you what you think. So I always ask a bunch of questions. They do not have a right or wrong answer. It's not a gotcha. When I say we have collective wisdom in this group, that's something that I'm interested in hearing from. And so before we start talking about what these folks have to say, I'd love to hear from you. When you hear the word overcoming, what does that mean to you? Yeah, Diana.
Strength to move forward.
Okay, strength to move forward. Thank you. Yeah, great. Dennis says, I can do anything. Yes, with the power of the divine in me, so can I. Thank you. Thank you. Rising above adversity. Yes. And I can't tell, Laura, if you're just like twitching or, okay, all right, that's fine. Anyone moves, I'm gonna call on them. Other thoughts, what?
Focusing on the good.
Overcoming might mean focusing on the good. Thank you, Linda, yeah.
Can I just say pulling yourself up out of the ashes?
Okay, pulling yourself up out of the ashes. And I won't ask you to identify. I know I've been in the ashes before. Maybe some other folks here in this group have as well. Okay, anything else people want to share before I keep going? Oh yeah, sorry, Stacy.
Enduring and not giving up.
Enduring and not giving up, yeah. And that beautiful song we just heard made me think of that too. Yeah, thank you, thank you. All right, well, there are times in Unity that I've heard people express that they don't like the word overcoming, and they don't like talking about adversity. And aren't we Unity, and aren't we focused on the positive? And you know, and if people take that approach, that's fine. I do see it a little differently, because I know, in spite of my divinity or along with it, I am still having this human experience. I'm guessing everyone in this room has had human experiences as well. I've had health challenges, I've had family members with health challenges, I've had loss, I've had elections that go the way that I wish they hadn't have gone. And perhaps everyone in this room can resonate with that as well. So for me, overcoming adversity isn't about pretending the adversity isn't there. It's not about denying, yeah, there's really a health condition. Yeah, my sister's really in the ER. Yeah, that election result was really not what I had hoped for. It's not about denying those facts. It's about, for me, being at a point of choice and recognizing, okay, when human stuff happens, I always have a choice. I can always choose, and my choices affect my experiences. Now, our Unity co-founder identified what he called 12 attributes of the divine, or 12 powers of the divine. And I actually believe there's probably way more than 12. But every month, Unity celebrates one of these powers. And because Unity teaches that we are all one with the divine, any of these powers that we identify as divine powers are in each of us as well. And so the power for the month of August is the power of will. And sometimes the way Unity uses the word will might be a little different than what we hear out in the world. So in Unity, the power of will isn't like willpower, like I won't eat those cookies, I just won't, I won't. I probably will. I will eat those cookies. I hear you, Steve. Me too. Yep. The power of will isn't oh, it was God's will that my sister should be in the ER. Because in Unity, we practice ideas of oneness. So there's not this idea like, oh, the divine wants something horrible for me that I wouldn't want for myself. In Unity, the power of will, I like to think of it more as like the idea of free will. The power of will means our ability to choose, that I always have free will. In any situation, I can always choose, what are my thoughts? What am I going to tell myself? What am I going to focus on? And I found this great affirmation on unity.org. I choose my good based on spiritual understanding. I choose my good based on spiritual understanding. And this prompts for me, what is my spiritual understanding? What do I think about myself? What do I think about the divine? What do I think about our relationship with each other? And how can I use those ideas of how I see myself, how I see the divine, how I see my relationship with the divine? How can I use that information to inform what I'm going to do next? So, like I mentioned, several Unity writers talked in this booklet about some of their ideas. I love in the introduction, Reverend Kathy Beasley talks about the point for her in the idea of overcoming adversity and using our spiritual principles and our spiritual practices. Reverend Kathy says, the real work for me was not necessarily in changing my circumstances, but in staying grounded in my truth as I moved through them. I believe this is how spiritual principles support our overcoming. They don't remove difficulty from our story. They give us a way to meet and overcome it. Spiritual principles steady our thinking, ground our words, and guide our actions. When we realize this, we stop asking whether we are capable, and we begin living as if we are. And I love that. I love the power of that idea of our spiritual principles being our rudder, being what helps ground us and center us. And like I said, there's lots of ideas in here about different ways to overcome adversity. I'm going to talk about 3 of them this morning that I've practiced. So one spiritual practice that I'm going to talk about is mindfulness, or the idea of being fully present. The next spiritual practice that I'm going to talk about is unity prayer, which some of you may be familiar with. And the last one is some abundance principles. Okay, so mindfulness, unity prayer, and abundance principles. Let's talk about mindfulness first. For me, mindfulness is the idea of being fully present without judging my experience, being in a place of acceptance. This is not easy for me. So about a year ago, my sister and I went to Spain to walk a portion of the Camino de Santiago, which is a spiritual pilgrimage that's been there for thousands of years. And I decided to practice the idea of mindfulness. And I set an intention before the trip that my goal was to be in a place of mindfulness, to be fully present to whatever was going on without having an experience of judging what was happening. And so right away, as my sister and I started the Camino, I noticed how slow my sister was. And at the time, she was having some health issues that were affecting her pace. And we had a third friend who was walking with us, who was a marathoner, who was, essentially marathoning to the end of every day. And I found myself getting really frustrated with my sister. Why is she so freaking slow? What is her problem? And I remembered my intention to practice mindfulness. And so I started asking myself, what is my frustration about? I have never been in this country before. I don't hardly ever get quality time with my sister. Why is it that I'm thinking whatever's down the road that I have not yet seen is somehow more important or better than right where I am? And that was a pretty big question for me. It helped me pass the miles and climb the hills as I pondered this question about what is that about for me anyway? Is this just like a really bad habit of being in a hurry? Maybe. But coming back to that idea of mindfulness really helped me work through those feelings of frustration and recognize how grateful I was to be right where I was, to be with my sister, to be in a beautiful environment, sometimes to be sweating up a hill or tiptoeing down a hill, either way, because they were difficult in both directions. But to recognize this is right where I want to be, and I might temporarily feel frustrated, and that's okay, because I can take a breath and be right here, right now again. So, mindfulness. The second practice I want to talk to you about is unity prayer. And unity teaches something called affirmative prayer, which are positive statements of good in the now. So I shared an affirmation earlier. I choose my good based on spiritual understanding. It's right now. I choose. It's not in the future. I'm going to choose my good tomorrow. It's right here. And it's positive. It's not, oh, I won't think any bad thoughts. It's, I'm choosing my good right now. We often use a statement of I am choosing, I am at a moment of choice right now when we do affirmations. And this type of prayer is based on Unity's first and second basic principles. So Unity's first basic principle is God is all good everywhere present. And the second basic principle is because we believe God is all good everywhere present, that means God is right here, right now with me and with you and with everyone. And so anything we envision being an attribute of the divine, we can claim and affirm for ourselves as well. Choice, peace, love, wisdom, discernment, anything. All right, so here's how we apply this in unity prayer. And this is a technique that the prayer team uses. So if you're interested in knowing what happens behind the curtain with the prayer team, it's something I find very useful. So if someone comes to us on the prayer team with a problem, or if I'm taking something into prayer that I'm looking at as a problem, our strategy is we look at what could the opposite of this problem be. And whatever the opposite of it is what we affirm in prayer, in meditation. Let me give you an example. If someone comes to us and they're having an experience of illness, we might affirm with them things like life, vitality, wholeness, well-being, energy, power, strength. There's probably an infinite number of ideas we could affirm together. Let me give you another example. If someone's coming to us with financial challenges, we might affirm with them abundance, appreciation, gratitude, harmony, supply, imagination. Again, an infinite number of ideas we could affirm. All right, this is getting back to the class part. We're going to try one together. No right or wrong answer. Imagine that someone is coming to you for prayer and they're upset about a recent political election. What could you affirm with them?
Peace and understanding.
Peace and understanding. Okay, great, thank you. Activism, or in unity, we call that power, our ability to shift and do something with the energy within us. Yes, thank you. What else?
Calm.
Calm, yeah, peace, ease, harmony, yeah. Wisdom, discernment, guidance, absolutely.
Make sure you vote.
Make sure you vote. I'm going to call that power and discernment. Yeah, yeah. Looking at what can I do? What can I do? Yes. All right, that was pretty good. How'd that feel? All right, let's try one more. Imagine someone is coming to you for prayer and they're feeling stressed. Doesn't matter why, they're just feeling stressed. What could you help them affirm? Freedom? Breathe. Okay, yeah. Inspiration. Yes, literally the breath of the divine. Yeah. Thank you. What else? Trust. Okay. And going on that oneness, the idea that the divine is right there. Well-being. Great.
Self-love.
Self-love, so that might also be called compassion for ourselves. Divine love. Thank you. Yeah. Release, yeah, maybe there's things to let go of. All right. So you see how it works. And sometimes it, requires a little thinking and maybe a little practice. And we can do this with ourselves too, that if we find ourselves struggling or facing what we're calling a problem, we can discern what might the opposite of this problem be, and choose instead, using our power of will, which I like to call our power of free will, to choose. We can choose to focus on that more uplifting idea instead. Now, for me, this is not about magical thinking. And again, it's not saying that the problem isn't there or pretending that it doesn't exist. It's about retraining my mind to look bigger and beyond the problem, to see more broadly, noticing what else is present and noticing what I can draw on, which will help me identify what could I do next, what might be an action that I could take or an inaction that I could take that will be supportive of me in this moment. When we choose to focus on a more uplifting idea instead of the problem, we're also putting into practice our third unity basic principle, which is that we co-create our experience through what we focus our thoughts on. And sometimes that's called the law of mind action. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. The more I focus on ideas of peace, the more I'm going to have that experience. And it works, unfortunately, if I'm focusing on an idea of lack. So if I'm focused on lack, the more I'm going to have that experience as well. So I can choose what I want to focus on. I want to share a story about how I use this practice of unity prayer with my family. I'm sure many folks have had this experience of having seniors and elders in the family that rely on me for help. And maybe you've had that experience too, where you've had family members who rely on you as well. I have younger siblings, and I'm part of their legal guardianship care team to to help make sure that they get what they want and need as well. And I found in the past year there were times I was driving around town feeling very overwhelmed and burdened just by the level of responsibility and feeling worried, like, am I going to be able to handle it? Am I going to be able to support my family the way they need? Am I going to be able to do what they need me to do when they need me to do it? Will I recognize what they need? So when I realized I was in this place of worry, I thought, what if I use that worry as a divine sacred reminder to shift and affirm something else? And so I decided I wanted to instead affirm discernment, guidance, and compassion. So every time I'd find myself driving around, I was always in the car for some reason, maybe that's where my brain gets to process stuff, and I'd start worrying, I'd say, thank you, brain, for reminding me, and I'd shift and affirm, I am discernment, I am guidance, I am compassion. These are my truth, and I know that this is what's expressing in my life. All right, so we've talked about mindfulness, we've talked about unity prayer. We're going to talk about our last practice of the day, which is abundance practices. And one of the writers in this little booklet that I talked about this morning, Reverend Bill Englehart, talked about his use of abundance practices. His story is a pretty good one. I hope you read it. He talked about when he was noticing he was in a moment of scarcity, and I like that he did the same thing that I talked about with unity prayer. When he was noticing he was in a point of scarcity, he decided to shift and affirm gratitude and blessing what he had in its place. So I really like that shifting idea that instead of worrying about whether or not there was enough, that he would look around at everything he had and blessed what he had and felt appreciation for it. He also took into meditation a specific Bible passage. And unity teaches something called metaphysical Bible interpretation. I always like to explain this in case you haven't heard about it or in case you grew up with another way of looking at the Bible. So in unity, unity doesn't get super hung up with, did stuff in the Bible really happen the way it was written down? Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But in unity, we hear that the most important thing isn't the words on the page. It's what does this mean to me? And what does it mean to you? In metaphysical Bible interpretation, the word metaphysical literally means beyond the physical. We look for a deeper meaning. And the great thing about it is we each get to have our own deeper meaning of something. Okay? So I think about it as if like we all went to the museum and we all looked at the Mona Lisa. We might all notice different things. One person might say, oh, her smile looks really shy. Another person might say, oh, her smile looks like she's hiding a secret. We each get to have our own interpretation of what the Mona Lisa means to us. And in a similar way, we each get to discern what a passage in the Bible means to us. So Reverend Englehart was taking the passage from the book of Matthew, chapter 7, verse 7. Ask and it will be given to you. Search and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. And he took this into meditation. And in unity, our fourth basic principle is that prayer and meditation remind us of our conscious connection with the divine. So I love that he took this into meditation. As he was having an experience of scarcity, what could he learn from this passage? And I always like looking at other people's metaphysical interpretations again, just to learn how other people see it, knowing I'm not stuck with what they think. If I don't like it, I can, find my own interpretation. But I really like his, and he said what stood out for him for this passage is the door would be opened, but it was up to him to walk through the door. No one was going to push him, no one was going to drag him, no one was going to make him walk through that door. And this takes us to unity principle number 5. Which is that we live the truth we know. That it's not enough for us to think, oh, there's these 4 principles and those are really nice, and then we just continue living life as usual. I don't know about you, but there's been times in my life that, there was Sunday and I went to church and had a nice experience. And then there were the other 6 days of the week. And then I'd go back to church on Sunday and they weren't necessarily connected to each other. That's not how I want to live anymore. I think about Zig Ziglar and having a daily shower, and I want to have a daily spiritual experience or spiritual shower. So I love this idea too about thinking about walking through the door. What is mine to do? The door is open. Am I walking through? Am I waiting for something? Am I not walking through? So I felt like that was a really good metaphysical Bible interpretation that resonated with me. I love that it came to Reverend Engelhardt in his prayer and meditation time. I believe that prayer and meditation can help us find numerous ways to overcome adversity. I'm so glad to have the opportunity to chat today and in a couple more weeks about this little booklet. We're going to have some special music shortly. And just to close out this talk this morning, I do want to encourage you, if you like to read, please consider reading this. If you don't like to read, that's okay too. We'll talk more about it in a couple of weeks. And I invite us all to reflect on some of these ideas, like what helps me to be in a place of overcoming? How do I face things that I might be tempted to call adversity? What is the door that's open in front of me that's inviting me to walk through? And considering this idea of our power of free will. What am I choosing? How is it working for me? Do I want to choose again? Thank you, friends.